Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tanya and You Chapter 4. Sorry for the late start, but good to see you. And we are ready to continue our series, our study, Chapter 4 of the Tanya. So we are in middle of understanding the functionality of our divine self, our divine soul. And over the next few chapters, this is what we're going to be discussing. And last week in chapter 3, we discussed the powers of the soul, the 10 powers, the 10 faculties of the soul, which were divided in two. They were divided in the three powers of intellect and the seven powers of emotions. And the seven powers of emotion, we kind of generalize them in the two feelings of love and fear. Now, because we're talking about the divine soul, the godly soul, so the Tanya really focuses on what the powers of the soul are in the divine world, right? So it's all about thinking about Torah, understanding Torah, feelings of love and fear of God. And the same is true in chapter 4 as he continues with the garments of the soul, also talking about them from the perspective of the divine soul. But as we'll see later in Tanya, they are two parallel devices, right? Operating systems within the human being. The animalistic soul as well also has these same 10 powers and garments of the soul. But the language of the Tanya, we elaborate the ideas based on the divine soul. So this is the same. The same is true in chapter 4. We continue with the three garments of the soul, and focusing on the garments of the divine soul. And what's beautiful about chapter 4, and I hope some of you had a chance to read it throughout the week, is that because we're talking about our relationship with God through the garments of the divine soul, we also find some beautiful ideas of what it means to have this relationship with God. What is a mitzvah? What is Torah study? So it's almost like parenthetically just to kind of describe what it means to have a garment of the soul. But while you're at it, like during this journey, we also have these beautiful ideas of what is a mitzvah and what is the idea of Torah study. So the chapter opens up with the concept of garments of the soul, which means there's the soul itself, the powers of the soul, which is intellect, understanding something, and our emotions, our feelings, right? We have the feeling of love for something, right? These things, they're not carved in stone. It's not that we can never change, right? We can have a certain emotion for something and then that could change over time. We could understand something and then over time we may decide that this is not accurate, it's incorrect. We could change our intellect as well, but it's not something that happens quickly and easily. It takes time. To change a personality takes time, if it's even possible. But then there are the garments of the soul. The garments are the expression of these powers of the soul, the way we actually express it. And like I say, TSA. The three garments are TSA: thought, speech, and action. The way we think, the idea of speech, and the idea of action. These are garments of the soul because these are merely expressions of the soul. In other words, just like garments, our clothing, we put them on, we take them off. We swap our clothing. We could be clothingless, right? It's not who we are. We also express ourselves through the garments, right? We wear certain clothing at certain occasions. Today's casual day. Today's formal day. Business formal, casual, right? All these languages you see on invitations. What to wear. Have to know exactly to fit in to the setting, to the atmosphere of the event. What am I going to wear? Right? Clothing are an expression of state of mind, right? Atmosphere. If I'm going golfing, I have a certain clothing. If I'm going to a wedding, it's different clothing. If I'm going to work, if I'm a doctor, if I'm a lawyer, if I'm whatever profession I'm at, they're different clothing. So they are a way of expressing ourselves. But most importantly, they are not who we are. We can also wear someone else's clothing. In other words, this is not, I can hide behind my clothing. You may think that I'm one person because the way I'm dressed, but truthfully, that's not who I am. Right? I can be someone who is very elegant, aristocratic type of person, but I could dress as someone very different, and vice versa. The same is true with the way we express our emotions and our intellect, and that is thought, speech, and action. Action, I do something. It's not who I am. I'm doing it. I may not have any emotions. I may not have any feelings to this action. I may not understand, or I understand that this is not what I want to do. I do it anyways. I do it now. I can stop doing it at a moment's notice. It's an action. It's a garment. Speech is another way of expressing who I am, my personality, my feelings, my thoughts, my understanding. And again, speech is a way of expressing it to others. I could speak, I could not speak. I could speak someone else's words. I could say things if I don't mean it. I could say things I don't agree with because it's not who I am. It's an expression of it's merely an expression, which means that I could switch it and I could lie about it as well. But when I do speak my feelings, I'm expressing my own feelings. It's not who I am. It's an expression. So it's a tool that I use to express who I am. And then we have thoughts. Now, thoughts, I can't stop thinking, but I could stop thinking a certain thought and switch it to a different thought. I could think someone else's thoughts. If I'm reading a book, I'm thinking someone else's thoughts. Now, let's not confuse thoughts and intellect, understanding, because I could understand certain things. And if it doesn't make sense, I won't understand it. But I could think thoughts even if I don't understand them. Right? So the simple example for that would be, I could think in my mind that 2 plus 2 is 5. I won't understand it, but I could think it. Because thoughts are merely a tool of the soul. It's not the soul itself. So thought, speech, and action, these are the expressions of the soul. So in this chapter, the Tanya goes into great depth talking about the importance of these 3 tools, these garments of the soul. And like we mentioned, it talks about it in a reference to the divine soul. So it talks about it in reference to our relationship with God. So thoughts are the way we think about the greatness of God. And speech is the way we talk about God. In other words, you could talk in prayer. We could study Torah is through speech. And action is doing a mitzvah. Right? So if we were living in a perfect world, if we were perfect human beings, understanding chapter 3 and 4 together. In other words, we have our powers of the soul. We have our intellect, where we understand the greatness of God. We have our emotions, right? Intellect gives birth to feelings of love and fear of God. And now I could take that to the next step. I could think about God. I could say words of Torah and also do a mitzvah. So here we have both the soul itself is connected to God, and also the way it's expressed through the garments of the soul, thought, speech, and action. So to use an analogy with the relationships to understand these the various steps and the way we could go about it, the correct way and the incorrect way. So let's talk about husband and wife relationship. We'll have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4. Act 1. The husband has strong emotions to his wife, loves his wife. But what happens is the husband doesn't want to express it. It remains inside. It's there. He's not lying. But he doesn't use garments of the soul. He doesn't use any words or action to express this love. They say the story, I think I said it many times, where there was a marriage counselor to a couple comes to the marriage counselor, and they're married for 35 years. The marriage counselor turns to the wife and says, "Tell me what's going on? What's the issue?" And she says, "Listen, it's been 35 years. It's been 35 years. He has never told me, 'I love you.'" You can imagine how difficult that is in a marriage. So the marriage counselor is surprised, turns to the husband and says, "No." What's your response? He looks very surprised and looks at his wife and says, "Honey, on our wedding day, I told you I love you. When that changes, I'll let you know." Okay. So Act 1, Scenario 1 is the husband has great feelings and strong emotions to his wife, but they remain inside. He doesn't express it. Now, is that good? No. You can imagine the wife is not happy. The wife is not happy because she wants that to be expressed in words and in action. Okay. Act 2. The husband is already educated. Okay, I can't just have an emotion in my heart. I have to do something. I have to express it. So they express it. What do they do to express it? The husband buys her a gift. But you know the gift that he buys? The gift that he loves most. He's not thinking about his wife. He's not thinking about what she wants. He comes home and brings 2 tickets to the next basketball game. And she says, "Honey, you know that I don't follow basketball. I have 0 interest in basketball." It's like, "Yeah, but I love it. And you can come with me. We'll have a great time together." No. You're expressing your love for self because this is not what I want. This is not what I consider a gift. You're not thinking about me. You're thinking about yourself. Okay. Scenario number 3. The husband's catching on. The husband says, "Okay, I got to buy a gift for my wife, something that she likes." So he comes home with these beautiful diamond earrings. And he knows his wife likes diamond earrings. Cut. Once upon a time, there's a husband and wife go to the mall. And the wife is going shopping. The husband says, "While you shop, I'll just hang around. Call me when you're ready." Sure. 4 hours later, the wife calls the husband, says, "Hey, where are you?" He says, "Honey, do you remember it's been a number of years ago when we were just married? We came together to this mall." She said, "Yeah, I remember that." "Do you remember we walked into a jewelry store and we saw this beautiful pair of diamond earrings and you really, really loved them and we just couldn't afford them? Do you remember that?" And she says, "Yeah, I remember that good and well." Says, "Well, I'm in the pub next door." Okay. So this time, the husband comes home with beautiful earrings. Knows his wife loves these earrings. And you know what he does? He says, "Here, you like this? Here." Throws it at her and says, "Take it. You can have it." Listen, I'm expressing my love in action. I'm buying something that she wants. But it was given without any feelings, of, "Wow, I'm so excited, I'm so happy." Act 4, finally, this husband is educated. And he says, "Okay, I'm gonna buy. I'm not gonna leave the feelings inside. I'm gonna express it in action. I'm gonna buy something that she loves, and when I give it to her, I'm also going to give it affectionately. I'll write a beautiful note. I'll say some really beautiful words to come together, hand in hand with the action. There should also be some feeling. Okay, this is the ultimate. This is what we're looking for, and the same is true with us and God. We have this relationship. Don't keep it inside. You believe in God. You love God. Great. Do something about it. But what do we have to do about it? We have to express it in thought, speech, and action. That's A. B, we have to also, the thought, speech, and action should be something that God wants, right? So often we say, I want to connect to God and I'm going to do something that has zero connection to what God wants. God says, I told you what I want. I gave you a book. It's called the Torah. And the Torah is a guidebook, a guide to life. You want to know what gift you should bring home for me for my anniversary? This is what it is. It's Shabbos, it's kosher, it's all the mitzvahs, right? All the beautiful 613 commandments. This is what God says. To give you a secret, you don't have to go to the store and start guessing what is she going to want. I'm telling you what I want. It's a gift registry, right? This is what I want. This is what I like. Don't buy me anything else. This is what I'm looking for. Okay, buy me something else. That's fine. But this is what I'm looking for. In addition to this, right? So we got to express our love for God, thought, speech, and action. It has to be through something, a thought, a speech, and an action that God is asking for, a mitzvah. But that's not enough. You also have to have the affection, the emotion that comes with it. We shouldn't do a mitzvah like, here's your gift. You wanted it, you got it. That's not the way God wants us to do a mitzvah. Do it with compassion. Do it with excitement. Do it with enthusiasm. Do it with love. Do it because, wow, what an opportunity I have to connect with God. That's the ideal. That's the ideal, the optimal way of doing a mitzvah. That you have both the emotions from within, the soul, the powers of the soul are involved. The garments of the soul are involved. And then the entirety of the person is engulfed in this connection with God. So this is the first section of chapter 4. The chapter continues and talks about that there is an advantage to the garments of the soul, even though they are seemingly like external tools. But there is an advantage to the garments of the soul over the soul itself, the powers of the soul. In other words, the optimal way of doing a mitzvah is to have both involved, the emotions and the garments. Right? Just having emotions, I love God. What are you doing about it? Nothing. That's not enough. You have to have the emotions and also take those emotions and infuse it in a mitzvah. You should also not do a dry mitzvah, right? Just do action without the emotions involved. Not good, right? Like they say, a mitzvah shouldn't be like you pay your taxes, or you pay your taxes just because you have to, right? No one says, hey, I'm so excited. Thank God I'm paying taxes. Give me more, right? No problem. Right? We do it because we have to do it. We're law-abiding citizens. We know it's the right thing. This is how we function. It's important to pay taxes. We may be very patriotic. At the end of the day, we're not excited about it. Torah says doing a mitzvah is not taxes. It's something that you should do with that emotion of excitement. Now, at the same time, through the garments, and even if we don't have that, that emotion involved, it's through the garments that we really connect with God in a much, much greater way. And this is what the bulk of the chapter discusses. What happens when we do a mitzvah? What happens when we study some Torah? Torah is not just something, a means to an end, a way to connect to God, a way to understand God's wisdom. Doing a mitzvah is not only, well, this is the way to have a relationship, right? I have to buy gifts. I have to say words of affection in order to strengthen my relationship with my spouse. In other words, There's nothing intrinsic in the gift. The gift is only a tool to express my feelings, and therefore it builds the relationship. No, a mitzvah is very different, because the gift of a mitzvah is godly itself. In other words, God infuses himself. He places his essence, himself, into the mitzvah and into the Torah. The word mitzvah in Aramaic also means connection. Savta v'chibur, connection, bonding, relationship, which means mitzvah is really the relationship itself. When we do an act, a simple dry act of a mitzvah, I take a nickel and I put it into the charity box, right? A simple mitzvah. God is in that mitzvah. It's not only a means to an end, a means to connect to God. That is godly. God had to, conceal his great light, and he puts it into his will, into his desire, into his mitzvahs. 613 channels. So we have the powers of the soul, our emotions. We have thought, speech, and action. Only through thought, speech, and action, even if it is a dry act, that and only through that do we have that strong bond with God himself. In other words, if I had a choice, two choices on the table. Choice number one, this is a theoretical choice, but it's not so theoretical because very often this is life for us. Choice number one is, I'm going to have a strong relationship with God within, in my heart. I'm going to feel a real love for God. Just like I feel a love for something material, I get excited. I feel it in my heart when I'm going to do something fun and exciting, or have a real strong relationship where I'm getting excited to be in the presence of someone else. That same feeling I'm going to have with God. I'm literally going to be in an emotional relationship with Hashem. Beautiful. To have a love for God, fear of God. I mean, this is amazing. And that's option number one. And option number one is that it remains at that. For whatever reason, I'm not going to have the opportunity to express it in thought, speech, or action. It's just going to be a very powerful emotion in the heart. That's option number one. Option number two is zero emotion. I don't feel it. You're talking about I should love God? I don't. Now what are you going to do? I don't have a feeling of love or fear of God. I believe in God, or perhaps I'm not sure if I believe in God. Could be I believe in God. Nothing from my intellect or emotions are connected to God. I'm just not there. I'm not there. But I'm ready to use my garments of the soul. I'm ready to use my thoughts. I'll think about God. I may not believe it. I may not understand it, but I'll think about it. I'm ready to use speech. I'll say words of Torah. I'll do prayer. I'll use speech for God. I'm ready to even live a life of action for God. I'll do the mitzvahs. I'll live an observant life. I'll be involved in doing all the commandments. Zero emotion, zero intellect. The powers of the soul, as the Tanya says, are not there. It's only garments of the soul. These are my two options. Now, obviously, the optimal is to have both, to have the emotion and have the expression as well. But what if I don't? Which one brings me closer to God? That's the question of chapter 4. Which one brings me closer to God? Option 1 or option 2? So chapter 4 argues, and he makes this beautiful, beautiful argument, and he brings it out beautifully. That at the end of the day, option 2 brings you closer to God. Because although it's very important for us, as a human being, that we should have a relationship with God, and relationship is really about emotions, nevertheless, where do we have the greater connection with God? When we actually do the mitzvah, when we study Torah. Because the Torah is God himself. God is one with his wisdom. Maimonides says that he and his wisdom are one. So God is one with the Torah. The Torah is a condensed version of God. So when we study Torah, we are connecting with God. When we do a mitzvah, God puts himself into the mitzvah. They use the analogy of limbs of a body, 248 limbs. What are limbs? It's a vessel for the life of the body, for the blood flow, right? This is who I am. These are God's limbs. When we do a mitzvah, we are connecting with God himself. Now, is it a physical act? Where is God? God is in the penny. God is in the charity box. God is in the Shabbat candles. God is in the tefillin. God is in the food. Well, where is God? So they use the analogy of a king wearing many garments. And you're going to hug the king. Does it make a difference if you're hugging the king through one garment or through 10 garments? It's the king that you're hugging through all these garments. So God's light is condensed. It's condensed in the physical reality. We don't feel it, we don't see it, but it's there. So when we do a mitzvah, using our thought, speech, and action, that's where it's at. That ultimately is the greatest connection that we can have with God. So option 2 is where it's at. And at the same time, if we're able to also infuse option 1 and have sync 1 and 2, to have our intellect, we believe and understand God. We also have an emotion, a powerful emotion of thought, of fear and love of God. And then we're able to take that and express it in our actions. So when we do a mitzvah, we're not doing it a dry act that I have to do it. I'll throw it behind my back. Here, take some money and buy yourself lunch. No, I'm doing it with a smile. I'm doing it with feeling, with emotion. That is the optimal way of serving God. So that is the gist of chapter 4. There's a lot more in the chapter, and if you haven't read it yet, highly recommend you reading chapter 4. It gives you a lot more language about God's connection with us, what the idea of the Torah is, what the idea of a mitzvah is, and how we have this relationship with God. So, yeah, that's basically what chapter 4 is, talking about the garments of the soul, how important it is, and how it really brings this greater connection that we have with God. Next week, we'll continue with chapter 5. Thank you, and I'm sorry about the late start, but thank you all for being here today. If you have any questions, please, I'd love to hear them. Yeah.
In the beginning.